Well, again, good morning, good afternoon. We're excited to have you, your participation in today's Strategy Huddle. My name is Ryan, and I'm an account product manager with MyStrategicPlan. The purpose of this call, the Strategy Huddle, is to talk strategy, to talk execution, and to address some real-world questions, provide some ideas and actionable solutions. Some quick ground rules. The presentation is targeted for 45 to 60 minutes. And we absolutely encourage your participation. There's a chat box on the right-hand side. If you identify yourself with a topic or question, have a best practice you want to share, just go ahead and type something in there or raise your hand, and we'll open the floor to you at the end of that topic to gain some of your insight. We will also be emailing a copy of this presentation with a link to the recording within the next day or two, so you'll have that for reference. And it's always just important to know that this is not a rehearsed presentation. We're on the fly, busy just like all of you. Put this together based upon some pressing topics we've had over the last month on Strategy Huddle questions. So that's where we're focusing today. And I'm excited to introduce today's Strategy Huddle leaders, and that's going to be Howard and Kim. After taking December and November off to focus on strategic planning season, and focusing on some of our clients' needs, we're back at it with a renewed focus on the Strategy Huddle, so we're excited about that. Howard is the co-founder of M3 Planning, which is the parent company of MyStrategicPlan, and really the brains behind the intellectual property of that system. He's the president of M3 Planning and also has a PhD in marketing with the emphasis on research. A lot of our strategy work, our work on strategy and the research side of the business is driven by his direction. Kim is one of our account executives or senior account executives on our professional service side of the business, where she manages, facilitates, and advises clients working with both nonprofit agencies, educational institutions, tribes, governmental entities, and so on. She also has 13 years of experience in fundraising, development, grant management, technical recruiting that she pulls into her experience as the account executive. Both Howard and Kim are involved in the MyStrategicPlan day-to-day of the system, but are also on the road considerable amount of the time working with clients. With that said, I'll turn the call over to Howard, and we'll get the Strategy Huddle started.
Good morning. Thanks, Ray. Just quickly, the agenda. In one respect, it looks like we've taken what would seem a fairly simple topic called strategy reviews meetings and really drilled down. So that's exactly what we've done, because in our work, and so we're finding that what seems so simple is really profound, and if it's done right, it really does make a huge difference. So I'm going to start out with, obviously we do every month a strategy stat, but then a high level of what we got to do to prepare to get it ready for one of these strategy review meetings, who we should invite. Then there's also different types of agendas, because there's different cultures in organizations, and then we're going to wrap up with some tips that we've picked up from facilitating sessions. And as Ryan said originally, let's tap into the wisdom of the crowd, because this is not about us, it's about strategy. Strategy is ever changing. What we're talking about, it really became full circle to me. Strategy is about change. When we're instituting strategy in an organization, we're bringing change to it, and change does not come easy. We all know that. The status quo is a whole bunch easier to handle, and our world's so busy, so why change stuff? And as strategists, that's what we're bringing to this. So this is, in one respect, it's simple, but it's really profound, because this is leading change. So with that said, as our strategy stat, it's kind of an interesting number. 7 people is optimal size of a decision-making group. Each additional member reduces effectiveness by 10%. So I don't know that there's any real quantitative basis behind that, but I do know that 7, it happens to be the biblical number for completeness or wholeness. So there is some reference to that that's gone on for thousands of years, if not. And so that's a good number. And I think in all our minds that we know that when the group gets too big, we lose the synergy, we lose the dynamics, And it makes sense to me when we start adding more people that we do reduce effectiveness. So I think we start calling these meetings and who we're going to invite. We need to be very deliberate on who's going to be in the meeting and who's going to prepare with us. So that's our basic strategy set. So let's launch into the kind of the high level, the guidelines of this planning, strategic planning meetings and so forth. So the must-dos before thinking about and instituting. Let's kind of, this is going to be the kind of the summary of the other parts of the session this morning. So this is going to set up the outline, and then we're going to dig back into it. So obviously it goes without saying that if we're going to have a strategy review meeting, we're going to take our strategy plan that we've put together and worked with folks on and so forth. We've got to have one that's fairly well complete. What we find on the practical side of stuff, we go through the facilitations, we do the sessions and so forth. When we get 70% of the plan done, and then trying to get the executive leadership team done, sit down and then put the plan finally together. In other words, what I'm saying is trying to develop the goals. We got to make these things smart. What are the key performance indicators, KPIs? Let's get those. Where's the data going to come from? If we can't get it right now, let's use a proxy. And then what comes to my mind when I just think of this is if we do not measure something, it's really difficult to manage. So that's what this is saying. And then the third point there, which seems so simple, is ready to separate strategy from operations. We're going to spend a lot of time digging into that because it's so easy. All of us have these tactical, operational things that are just beating in our brains every day, and it's so hard to separate that from the other one. So with that, here's a couple guidelines that we might want to look at, and then, like I said, the first one, separate these strategy reviews from operational reviews, because it's easy to roll back into taking care of and being concerned about all the different issues of the business and so forth. So you really, if we're trying to institute change, we get stuck in the operations and stuff and so forth. And when I'm talking about operational type reviews, and we typically have them, they're pretty much data focused things. They're on budgets, cash flows, sales forecasts, variance analysis. That's more or less where the operational review's at. The next point is review strategy on a monthly or quarterly basis, and we're going to get into a couple agendas on that. Part of the problem with it, strategy is supposed to be long-term. We're not trying to just change strategy on a monthly basis or on a weekly basis, so it's like, monthly may be too frequent and quarterly may be too infrequent, so we're going to deal with a couple topics on how to do that. Part of it has to do with the culture of the organization. Open reporting, it's a key part that, when we bring strategy in and we're trying to make sure we got enough folks sitting around a table that represent all different functions in there, we want to make sure that we include everybody's thoughts, and it's just not something that's being driven down from the top. So when we start doing open reporting, we start showing red light, green light for those of you that use our system and so forth, and you've got a department that's got a whole bunch of red lights. We have our little egos. We don't, as leaders at times, we don't like to show, inside our kimono, so to speak, that it's not all green and all good and so forth. So when we start doing open reporting, the transparency is there, but a lot of times it does promote teamwork. And then create an issues-focused, issues-oriented meeting agenda, and there's a number of different ways to do that, and Kim's got some good ideas on that. So, but what I would say here is I go back to Eisner's quote at the beginning. This is a meeting, got to be prepared. This is not another meeting as usual where somebody's going to run it and everybody else is just going to be sitting around the table with a numb brain and so forth. Be prepared and show up. So Kim liked to go into that first point, the operational and strategy reviews, just a little bit deeper, and she's got some really good ideas on that.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Our next slide is titled Getting Set Up. this again is just going to recap on the difference between operational reviews and strategy reviews. Critical difference between the two. An operational meeting, often set weekly, whether it be weekly or monthly, focuses on short-term operations, not so much the higher level strategy or strategic goals of the organization, but much more what's happening on a tactical basis, more tactic, actions oriented, whereas a strategy review should be long-term. The nature of a strategy review is focusing out longer term, talking about strategic themes or issues, our status against our high department or organization level goals, some of the whether we're moving forward, what do we need to do to move the dial, have some real high-level strategic brainstorming discussions at these strategy reviews. And an interesting quote or interesting piece of fact from a BRC study recently is, for most organizations, these operational reviews are essential to management and oftentimes are the only management meetings that take place, but with its operational nature, the focus of the agenda, there's not often time enough left for strategy in these higher level strategic conversations. I'm just going to move us forward and go over again just the difference of different types of discussions that take place in these strategy reviews versus operational reviews. Strategy reviews, again, a navigational term is at the waypoint level. These are highways in the sky, a chance to take a step back, take perspective, check in with where we're at against our goals, allow for some course correction, if you will, if we need to revise some of our goals because we're not moving forward at the pace we initially intended to. Let's take a look at why that's happening. What are some of our dependencies? How do we need to work together better to move this goal forward? And what are some changes that possibly we might need to make? That's an example of some of these strategic issues and an opportunity for course correction. These are check-in points. Also, keeping in mind that the point of a strategic plan is that it's flexible and nimble and a living document that we can change on a frequent basis as needed so that it remains relevant and executable. And those are the types of discussions that can come up in these strategy reviews. Opportunity to brainstorm, think strategic, and get out of the operational weekly short-term tactics. That said, the operational reviews, again, going back to that navigational term, we're at the runway level here, coming in for landing, not thinking long-term. We've got to think about our actions, our short-term actions, to ensure a safe landing if we're thinking navigational terms. But really the big difference is operational. We're talking about our short-term actions and tactics. What is happening this week, for example, communication around travel plans, schedules, individual report outs, things of that nature.
Kim, I had a little bit of a thought on the strategy reviews. One of the thoughts, we got about key performance indicators and so forth, and versus with the operational things, is that strategy is about cause and effect, lead and lag, and so much of the stuff in the operational meetings is all, in fact, whatever happened. It's just like, here it is, that's the result, that's way on, off target, so forth. Where in the strategy meeting, we are looking at where we're headed, but we're also looking back to kind of say, what are these lead indicators that are causing us to go that? And if things are starting to pop up before we get there, then we need to start making these course corrections before we get there, like what you're saying. So if we go back to that, what was the last summer, right, where the Wall Street Journal article where it said strategy, as we know, is dead and so forth. The point is that strategy that's based upon etched in granite 5-year plan is dead, and more so than ever now since we're living in this flat world. Strategy as we really know it, where we're trying to make changes and affect and be lined up with our environment is much alive, and we need to be putting our finger on the pulse and making those changes that Kim was talking about currently, and not get caught up in problems a couple of years down the road when we've missed things. So that was just that one little thing popped up in my mind about the lead and lag. Lead and lag, it's an important thing. So there's many different ways to do a lot of these meetings and so forth. And interesting part of these thoughts come from what we've seen in working with our clients, and then also that preeminent company out there doing strategy is the Balanced Scorecard Review Collaborative, Palladium, Kaplan and Norton team that started this about 15 years ago. So we pull some of our stuff from there, and it's always kind of interesting for us to find that what we're seeing in the smaller mid-market companies, that's also being echoed in the large ones. So here's an example of two different types of agendas depending upon the type of organization and how you style that you run your meeting. I'm going to go over option one, and then Kim is going to delve into option number two. In option number one, as you can see there, is doing strategy more on just once every quarter, and so what we have there is you can see, is we've got operational meeting at the leadership level, and then we separate ourselves. That's so important to make sure that we got this clean break between tactics and operations, and as we move into strategy. So then at once every quarter, then we pick up our plan, and that's assuming that every month the departments and staff people are updating, so we know what we're on point and so forth. So then we have the strategy review where we've backed off, and we've set our topics and so forth. We got pre-assigned strategy things that we want to talk about. Probably what we might see in this situation is an organization that's operating a little bit more stable environment, where they really don't want to pick strategy up but once every quarter. Part of the problem with that is strategy is this whole thing is there's no magic bullet in it. It's a matter of keeping things top of mind. So if we only visit strategy every quarter, we might put it in the second place. But we see maybe in the public entity side of things, for cities and counties, because they've got some other things going on, that they may adopt this type of session where each month they do their department operational meetings, roll up their strategy, make sure they're on target, incorporate anything that they've been working on, like from the annual strategy update. And then once the quarter, it rolls into the senior management where they spend, 3, 4, 5 hours, depending. Sometimes we've seen situations where they'll spend a whole day trying to work on this. So then you've got the senior leadership team sitting there just focused on strategy. They've picked up what's happened operationally that might have generated some other changes or strategic thoughts. Go through this, and then what will happen is a lot of times then this information that flows out of the session is the note there is this will end up being topics then for the report for the board meetings and so forth, because as a board, as we all know, the board should be focused on strategy and not tactics and operations. So this then helps to precede or develop the thoughts that should be given to the board to make some final decisions. But underlying this whole thing is the fact that their staff has to be continuing to update their operational plans and stay attuned to the strategy as we roll through the quarter. But it's just an underlying thing. So that's a quarterly situation. Then and again, like I mentioned, sometimes if you don't want to relegate the strategy thoughts to something that's you just pull off the shelf every 90 days. There's other ways to do it, and Kim's got another option here that shows a second way to keep strategy top of mind.
So option number two is the option of a monthly strategy review, and just to kind of recap what Howard mentioned, while quarterly reviews can seem too infrequent, monthlies could possibly feel a little too frequent, and it really depends on the culture of the organization and what fits best with your actual organization. The monthly strategy review, you'll see on this slide here, we're working with a large organization right now that's operating this way with the monthly strategy reviews tied in correlation with weekly status and operational tactic meetings. And what I mean by that is their weekly operational meetings happen once a week, 4 times a month, and then once a month they tack on an extension to that weekly status meeting as their monthly strategy review. So it's very much in their rhythm of the business on a monthly basis to extend one of their operational meetings and dig a little bit deeper into some strategic issues, some strategic themes, and just take a moment to check in at the strategic level. So again, depending on your culture and how it best fits and how frequent you feel it makes sense for your team to have a strategy review. So that's sort of what this slide is reflecting. Is, you know, an example of a meeting might be the first part, reviewing your operations, and then the second part of the meeting, digging into the strategy. This next slide is sort of a timeline view of what actions might look like in a month based on the notion of having a monthly strategy review. This depends, you know, on the structure of your organization, whether there's various departments or if it's a smaller organization that just works with a leadership team and team members below that. But an example is, you know, on the first week, team members would go online into the system or whatever your system is to update their status on their actions, their operational tactics, and how those are correlated with some of the higher level strategic goals in the plan. Once that has happened, the department leader would then go in and see how the team members are doing in correlation with their actions, and then update the status of the plan at the department level, goal level, so that going into the department operations strategy review meeting, that department leader would have a report showing status of not only the individual team members, but the department holistically to discuss the strategy at that department review on week 2, which might be just an extension of possibly an operational meeting or just a separate strategy review in general. So you'll see on this slide, you know, just how it might play out throughout a month. Again, it shows here on week 3 a senior management team operations strategy review. So that would depend on the size of the organization, whether you have both a department strategy review and a senior management team review. It depends on the org structure. The important thing to remember is that in these conversations at the strategic level, that all functions are represented within the organization, so that it's a holistic conversation, not just the senior management or leadership team making these strategic decisions and discussing these issues, but cohesive team involving all functions of the organization.
You know, Kim, when I look at this thing, it makes my head hurt.
Yeah,
it like, holy smokers, I don't have this kind of time in my company to do this. So, you know, how does this really work, or is this some academic thing? What is your experience?
So in this slide, I agree, this is a bit, it's a heavy slide to look at. And so I think, you know, the slide aside, more the importance of the point of the discussion and the process in general, and what we're seeing work very effectively is these strategy meetings, whether they happen monthly or quarterly. It's a really nice time to sit down, to take a step back, to reflect on how we're doing, to check in. What are we doing that's working well? What are we doing that's not working? What do we need to change? Who do we need help from? What are some themes or strategic issues that need to be discussed further and worked out. And it also just allows for some refreshing time to brainstorm and to talk about things that are above the operational tactics. So again, whether that happens monthly, quarterly, whatever works for your culture, the important thing to remember is it's a forum for high-level discussion.
You know, I wonder what if any of our listeners have input on that, of what kind of rhythm of meetings that they've experienced, whether it be a quarterly or a monthly, and kind of the wisdom of what they've got. But you know, just like what you're saying, it's getting it started. Thinking about, okay, at some kind of regular basis, we've got to update what's going on. So we have the team members picking up, you know, and so they understand where they're at, and providing information up to the leadership team, and then we're making a decision. But I think one of the points that I'd like to make is on week 4, says plan guidance reported back to the team. What we see, one part of this strategy process is that to keep everybody in the loop, they have to be aware of what's happening with all their efforts. So we need to report back to them so they know what's really going on, so they're not working in a vacuum. So Kim, here's a little sample agenda, I guess, on how things might be done. You got any key points you'd like to add to this thing?
I think again, it's a sample agenda for these strategic meetings. And not to hammer on this, but again, the meetings seem to be more effective if they're based on particular themes or strategic issues, keeping the conversation high level. So looking at the agenda, say we've got several departments as well as the leadership team, it may start with the department manager giving a high-level overview of how his or her department is doing in correlation with their strategic goals. Highlight any issues or themes that need further discussion, and determine what's on or off track that the greater group needs to be aware of. And then after each department manager has gone through and given that high-level status report, focusing on wins and losses, what's off track, what's on track, digging deeper into some of those strategic issues or topics which may have come up in the reporting out, or that may have been identified prior to this meeting from a previous meeting that we know we need to discuss further. So ensuring that there's time allowed for the deep discussion, and we're not just spending all of our time reporting out, if you will, but really making sure that these strategy meetings allow the time and the space to have deep discussions, to brainstorm, to think about solutions, to think about alternatives to some of our issues that we may be having, and to really allow for course correction if needed, and the big ideas to come up front.
What would be a big idea? You have any examples of we keep talking about, you and I both said strategic issues. Well, in your experience, what has been a strategic issue that should be discussed at one of these sessions?
So I have we work with a school district, and what comes to mind, an example of one of their strategic issues is continual challenges with attendance amongst the students in this particular school district, and it keeps coming up as a problem, and it's an example of something that let's take a moment and let's look at what we're doing. What are we missing here? What do we need to do different? How do we need to tie in the parents and the community to help us resolve this issue? Obviously, attendance is not just a problem of the school district, but it's greater in terms of scale, and it's an example of something of, okay, so let's have a big idea of how can we bring the community together to help us resolve our challenge with attendance, and what do we need to do differently. So that would be an example of a big strategic issue or theme that requires some real thinking and ideas for other alternatives and other solutions.
So it's something that cuts across more than just, how do we do our counting better or something like that, which is stuck in one of the silos or functions. It cuts across. It needs a brain power, a bunch of people, so it needs to be discussed and bring all the facts and circumstances put on the table to mull through it. And maybe, probably, we can't even come up with solutions for the time or two, but at least ways it starts the thought process, so.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So moving us along, and we've talked about this a lot, the issues-oriented. Just to kind of recap, for these strategy meetings, spending minimal time on reporting out, focusing on the key points and the high points of where we are against our status, focusing the agenda on themes or issues that cut across all departments. An issue of attendance, for example, it's affecting our momentum of moving forward in our strategic plan, because without the kids in the school, we're unable to reach our goal of 99% graduation rate, for example. So being disciplined also about prepping these issues or themes in advance so that we're prepared for these meetings, and also focusing on discussions, not so much on PowerPoint, but focusing on the key brainstorming and dialogue. So with that said, attendees, handouts, frequency, and the schedule of these meetings. Who should be there? What should we bring with us? And when should they occur? This slide just gives a real simple overview of what might happen on a weekly basis. This would be much more at the operational level, whatever your organization uses internally for a reporting system, whether it's some kind of a status form, status report, or whether that's just individual reporting. But the monthly or quarterly strategic meeting, in terms of who attends, that should be the managers with their team, and separately a senior management team. So two possible meetings, again, depending on the structure of your organization. If there's an organization with several departments, then recommended two separate meetings, one with the department managers and their team, preceding another meeting with, say, department managers and the senior leadership team. In terms of what reports to use or what's useful for those strategy meetings, the action plan, which is generated from MyStrategicPlan, shows whether you're printing out at the department level or at the individual level a roll-up of status against your goals at a department level, and is a very useful report for those strategy meetings. And then moving on to whether it's a quarterly or a semi-annual offsite. This is kind of the larger strategy meeting that may involve more time, and this is when maybe we want to reevaluate our strategic plan in general. Who's attending there? This is very much at the senior leadership team level. This is the point where we're checking in with the fundamentals of our plan and the strategic framework, reviewing strategy, long-term objectives and themes, and adapting our strategic plan. Reports to use there, we have the interactive dashboard through MyStrategicPlan, which is a dynamic view of your plan that could be projected up on a screen, for example, as well as action plan reports are also useful there. But the dashboard is a nice interactive tool to use at these offsite or strategy meetings as well. Anything else on that, Howard?
Can I make another plug on
Yes.
this one? It's just that we've changed the ability for the alerts. A lot of folks don't realize that we can set the alerts automatically in a system, and people get an email that says, by the way, Kim, these are the 5 things that you're responsible for. How you doing? You click on the button, and away you go. It takes you into the system. We've just updated how we can do that. Before it was just on a monthly or weekly basis. Now we have more options to take with that. So that's keeps strategy front of mind for everybody that way automatically. So that's a good thing. So we got our little process here that again just shows who what, why, when, and, what might be leading up to the particular session. This is another detail, but it kind of gives us information on how to manage the process. When we got our executive administrators helping us with this, it's a kind of a checkbox. It's kind of really a nice summary of everything that's together there, and you could see that way on the right-hand side, what it gives us particular dates, and like it's T-6, so 6 days up to before we actually do the strategy review session. We're getting financial information, then we're updating the leadership information and look at the plan and so forth. But then we got to remember, the meeting in itself isn't an end. We have the meeting together, then we've got to report out. So that's the important part. We've got to revise things, get information out, keep everybody in the loop on what's really happening in our strategy process. Again, we are trying to bring change to the organization. Strategy is about being different, being unique, and so forth, and we're trying to move away from status quo. So it needs to be communicated out. With that, we've got a couple tips and tricks, so to speak, things that we've kind of learned, Kim and I, as we've gone through this thing. When we're having these strategy meetings, the leader, the strategy leader, whatever the terminology is for the person that's there, we need to, it's nice to make decisions, and it's nice to think about things and stir up the pot, but make sure that we've got as a basis for making these thought decisions, some information analysis. And as we've got on the bottom there, is it a discussion or is it a dialogue? A discussion basically is just mulling through topics, everybody putting their ideas out there, not right or wrong, just put them on the table. But if we're dialoguing, it means we're taking the decision, we're moving it along, and we're going to take discussion and make a decision from it. So what kind of, are we just discussing or are we dialoguing? So that's important to understand what mode that we're in. We want to move away from this group think where everybody kind of just sits in a vegetated state and so forth. We want to make hasty decisions, move on, because strategy is not about being hasty. Strategy is about being different. Strategy about understanding what does it take to be different, how are we going to leverage and make that all come together. So it's the time to really get the old juices flowing. As we've heard so many times before, it's time to think outside the box, and it really this is an important thing to do. And again, as Kim mentioned, the strategy, when we're talking about strategy, we're talking about things that cut across organizations, and we have to have representatives from all the functions. So people are there to provide their right input. They all don't have to be at the C level or the senior leadership level, but they've got to be able to represent their particular viewpoint, and we have to honor and all those different viewpoints and consider those. And then the strategy manager, serves as a lead for keeping this thing going. And one little side that I thought about as we've gone through here, when we're doing all these updates and so forth, looking at things, we got to celebrate our wins, little wins, big wins. And we even think about just going back and as being parents and so forth. It's always important. We know we get more changes and forward movement from a family or from an organization when we celebrate wins, encourage people versus always looking at the red light side of things. So we got to encourage it and look at a little bit of yellow and green light stuff and so forth. So that's the facilitation stuff. Then we hear a lot of times, when we're talking about a three-month or a quarterly meeting or a 1 month meeting, sometimes we can lose momentum. And this is where we really have to make sure that our senior leader, who's a champion of this thing, is a visionary person, and they keep the juices flowing. But what we can do if we're starting to lose a little bit of momentum and so forth, they got the strategy maps, so people can see where they're moving. They can get reconnected with what's going on. Kim, have you had any challenges with keeping things relevant?
I think that just goes back to making sure that our plan is a living document, as we call it, making sure it's relevant, meaning changing or revising any goals that no longer apply, things of that nature. keeping it up to date and current so that it matters and everyone's still connected with it. If a goal's been sitting there for 2 years and nobody's, there's been no action or no momentum, then let's get rid of it, because obviously it's not a focus at the time. So
tweak it back in. Yeah. Then as a third point, though, the old WIFM, just like I mentioned, we've got to have wins. It just can't be the big, as Jim Collins would say, the big, hairy, audacious goal that we're gonna get someplace in 25 years from now. We got to get someplace in 25 days as well. So make sure that there's wins in there somewhere along the line. Canceled meetings. So easy to do. We don't need another meeting. And boy, I'll tell you what, once you start pulling the strategy meeting out of the regular rhythm, it just kind of falls by the wayside, and it's kind of hard to put it back in. If you've got any insight on that from different folks that you've worked with?
I would say, I think just it's keeping in mind that the strategy meetings, there are those opportunities. You'll see we have a quote on the next slide that ensuring the discussions are exciting and not death by meeting, if you will. And these strategy meetings are really our opportunity to have those exciting discussions that are outside of our daily, weekly operational tactics. And if we don't allow our time as a group, as an organization, to discuss some of these strategic themes, to really dig deeper into the issues that we need to talk about in order to move forward, then we're not allowing for our greatest potential. So.
Yeah, for sure. Well, number 5 point, how many times we've heard that in the last couple of weeks when we're doing that? Well, you're adding some more stuff to me, just like busy work. And what we found to make this happen, it's a little messy in the front end, and it takes a few times to work through it, to streamline it, but in the long run, to keep these things going at the staff level and so forth, using some kind of a system, whether it's MyStrategicPlan or the old Excel document or whatever else, updating and so forth, it should be a few minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, a week or whatever. It's not this huge thing, and it's not in addition. We're not trying to break somebody's back with a bunch more work to do. So and we're just and to break through that in the front end, you just have to be committed to get the flywheel turning, so to speak, or Eric would say, let's turn the dial on this whole thing and so forth. So it's not busy work. It's something that should make a difference. You got any other thoughts on busy work?
I would just say it's much more interactive work than busy work, and the beauty of all of this, if it plays out the way it should, is it's a bit of distributed execution. Everyone plays a role, from the department manager to all the way down to each, depending again on the structure of your organization, but to each team leader and to each individual team member. Everyone plays a role here, and keeping in mind the connectivity to the overall strategic plan and everyone's role is also a nice way to think about it.
So we've got a lot of things we've talked about. If you've got a summary you'd like to go through?
Yeah, I'd say just to recap on, which option works best for your organization in terms of how frequently you conduct a strategy review. It might be a combination, whether it be monthly, quarterly, tailoring that based on your organization's culture. Next, scheduling. It's really good to calendar these out for the year so that at least to attempt, whether it be, the second Friday of every month or, whatever it might be that works best with your team. It's great to schedule those out and get them locked in the calendar because as I mentioned before, these strategy review meetings are really a chance to it's a chance for these thriving conversations, discussions, and dialogue to happen. And if we're only focused on our operational meetings, it doesn't allow for the opportunity to really think big and to think about what matters to all of us and what we can do differently and how we can really move forward on towards our goals. Outlining our specific data points. That, again, is cultural, I think, in terms of what reports and who's involved. But as we mentioned, through the MyStrategicPlan, the action plan reports are really useful for these strategy check-ins, and just keeping in mind that through these discussions, you want to be careful not to get stuck in the reporting out mode, so that you're just sitting there as each department manager's reporting on status. The intention is for hitting on the high points of status and hitting on any dependencies and what we need to do to move forward. So just to reemphasize that these strategy meetings are not just about reporting out on status. We want to keep the discussion and the dialogue active.
Death by meeting.
Death by meeting, and that is the one thing that I've seen. There's a big difference in these strategy meetings between the ones where you're going around the room and reporting on your status, or the ones where you're going around the room and you've got your action plan in front of you, but you pick a couple high points. This is where we won in the past month. This is what we did really well. This is where we're having a hard time. This is where we could use some advice from the room or from other leaders in the organization to help us move forward. So there's certainly a difference between the two styles.
Make the strategy your own organization's. Give it a name. Give it something exciting. So, Ryan.
Well, that said, we'll open it up. If anybody has any questions they want to type in or raise their hand, we can open the unmute your phone if you're not on headset or on your computer speakers. But we had one question that came in. Someone chatted in. They said a previous call topic talked about meetings and agendas and thinking of the outcome being sought or the purpose of that meeting. Does that apply here, or is it more so the process that matters?
It's a process. Well, one thought in my mind, it's the process getting prepared. That's really important. Outcome of the meeting.
I'd say the outcome of the meeting would some strategic decisions made based on the strategic plan in general, or strategic decisions that were made or that might go to the board, for example.
Right.
Possible other discussions that need to happen.
Yeah, so I think it's probably on both sides because this is so, and I'm glad, that's a great question. You think about that. I mean, a lot of times it's about the process that we get, whatever else. I think when this is done right, because we're not talking about these huge, repetitive things that are just boring and so forth. The process, because we're trying to institute change, people getting ready to do this stuff. So the process getting ready is important. Having the right meeting and the type of meeting, and then having the outcome, where you've come to some type of direction or report or whatever else, because we're trying to make things different inside of an organization. So, maybe every meeting we don't have a huge outcome, but I would think the vast majority of them in a year, they've got to have.
So essentially, the outcomes you're driving, you're continuing to drive the change, and you're not having the death by meeting. I guess that's the outcome as a generic outcome. But so if you could try to come up with more specific, possibly meeting to meeting, may not be as straight as that, but the process obviously matters, and the outcome, if you could drive towards one in a meeting, I guess it helps with the focus.
Yeah, because so many times what do? We go to a meeting and somebody's got, the PowerPoints are up there, and you sit there and report out, and everybody yawns, and they walk out the door. And this is not about that at all, because we're asking people to get involved in some action, to pick up their thoughts and getting them going, and sharing information across departments and so forth. So, I mean, if it's done right, it should make a big difference. Obviously, we've all been in meetings that aren't done right, and and it just crumbles because we don't have the proper preparation, and or do we have the proper facilitation of the meeting?
Okay. We have one more question, and then we'll wrap up. The question is, how do you get an organization to shift from yearly strategy meetings to more frequent meetings? It didn't define what frequent is, but I guess would you shoot for, if you have yearly, would you shoot for quarterly, or would you try to shoot down all the way to monthly? Is that too frequent? What would
Well, it's not,
What would be the advice there?
it sounds really, initially, and Kim's I know she's got some thoughts on this as well. What we've talked about so many times with our clients and so forth is strategy has been about an event, the preparation of a plan. We've noted many times anymore that, we're all pretty good at putting a plan together, but it isn't about the plan, it's about strategic management, and that's where the change and things really start making a difference in our organization. So I think if I was in that initial stage where we did an annual thing and developed this plan and kind of every now and then talked about it, I would maybe, quarterly, you think, maybe?
Probably be the simplest transition if you're only doing it annually to move to quarterly. But again, that depends on the culture of the organization. I think it's an important point what Howard mentioned is so often you see strategic planning as an annual event with the outcome and the result being the strategic plan. But if you just have the plan and you put it on the shelf, then really what's the point of that? Where it's about the implementation of the plan, checking in with the plan, making sure that it's still relevant, making any revisions that need to happen to keep us connected with that plan. And that's really the point of these monthly or quarterly strategy meetings, is to make sure that that our plan is relevant and that we're doing what we need to move forward, and not just creating our strategic plan once a year and then sort of forgetting about it until we meet again 12 months from now.
Yeah, so if we took the annual and kind of took it in bite sizes and whatever we might have done on the annual and started distributing it over the year, that might work.
So as a best practice, it's my understanding on the professional service side, when you talk to clients, the initial best practice we share is that they're just getting in the strategic planning is do it monthly for the first, 1, 2, or 3 months, and then break out quarterly. That's a best practice there, coming from nothing or not having a strategic planning initiative at the company. So that's a best practice on that side, coming from that point. But if you're coming from already doing some level of strategic planning in an annual retreat, go back to what Howard and Kim were talking about as one option there.
Quarterly, yeah. Well,
And certainly not to discount the importance of that once a year annual retreat, if you will, to an extended meeting to really dig into the strategic plan, and it's good to do on an annual basis at an extended level.
And just like what you're saying, keeping it relevant, I think when we all find ourselves that the environment around us is moving so quickly, and strategy is all about trying to align, but we've got resources and talents and skills inside of our company to what's going on around us, and with what's going on around us is changing so rapidly that it's like we really need to do some more regular than an annual deal. And that this would help then people to at least get it started. As Ryan just said, it's sometimes you got to crawl before you can walk, before you can run, and having small little meetings might be helpful.
Well, with that said, we definitely appreciate everybody's participation, listening in today. The next strategy huddle will be a month from now. We try to have it the fourth Wednesday of each month, so it's going to be February 23rd. We will have a link posted on the website by end of day to get registered there if you're interested. We don't have any questions that have come in yet for next month, so send in any questions, pain points, something you'd be interested in hearing about. You can send that in to admin@MyStrategicPlan.com. If you're interested in sharing or presenting as best practice as a strategy leader, we encourage that. We've had a few in the past. So we're not asking you to take over a 5, 10, 20-minute presentation. If you have a topic that you want to do that, we will be happy to open that floor to you. But if it's even just a 5-minute go over two slides, we'd be happy to have you present the best practice or experience that you've experienced. A shameless plug, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We always enjoy the conversation there at MyStrategicPlan. And then today's session is recorded. PowerPoint or the slide deck will be emailed with that link following, actually by noon tomorrow we will get that out to you. And outside of that, we definitely appreciate your participation. Thank you to Howard and Kim for taking the time today to to share with us, and any last closing words?
Strategy is about change. And change is a challenge. Go for it.